This is Keith Whalen from RPI Consultants. Very exciting. We have an updated CloudSuite version 11 pre-planning presentation for you here today.
All right.
And with that, I give you Richard and Michael.
That goes well. Thank you. Awesome. Hey, Michael, glad to be up here with you today talking about CloudSuite pre-planning engagements.
Absolutely.
So what's pre-planning? How is it different than just planning? Right? Pre-planning is the exercise that we go through before getting a CloudSuite implementation project started, right? The idea is to get an idea of what this project is going to be. How big of a project is this? What are the outcomes that we should expect from a CloudSuite project? And to start aligning your team and start building that consensus across the business that this is the right direction, getting your business involved.
Absolutely. So many people do something like this, right? They might call it budgeting or getting ready to go to the board. This is a little more formalized, and we'll walk through some of the key aspects and key steps of it. But having it structured and formalized like this, like we're going to go through, really gives some sense to the chaos.
Great. So why does it even matter? Like, why go through a pre-planning exercise? Moving from Lawson to CloudSuite is a pretty different beast than previous Lawson upgrades, right? Where prior Lawson upgrades were oftentimes IT driven, oftentimes focused on minimizing disruption to the business. With CloudSuite, we have a once-in-a-generational opportunity to take structures and configuration that might have been decided years ago as part of a Lawson implementation and remake those decisions based upon what the business looks like today, all the while leveraging that deep Lawson expertise that a client has. Because when we look at CloudSuite, although it's a new modern application, we definitely see that it shares some Lawson DNA.
Absolutely. There's, for instance, over 1,200 enhancements to supply chain. Never before in any other upgrade have we had 1,200 enhancements to anything, let alone just one vertical. So a great opportunity to rethink both the application and your business processes.
Yeah. So we'll talk about our framework for pre-planning, and it's going to help put you in the best position to launch a CloudSuite project. And it starts by defining what that project is, and that's going to help you with your capital budget planning. We take a look at phasing and what to expect, over 1, 3, or 5 years as an organization goes through this transformation.
It's no longer just thinking about what's it going to cost, right? But how are we going to do this, right? How do we roll it out over that timeline, and what goes first, and what does that mean for what I have today, right? There's a lot of things to figure out, and through this presentation, I think we'll hit on a couple of those.
Great. What are some of the outcomes that a client should expect or should build in as part of the goals of their CloudSuite implementation? And we look at an improved reporting and analytics that's driven not just by the better reporting tools and platform that we have available in CloudSuite, but by reorganizing how our data is structured in the system, optimized in such a way to get that data out. Both on the financial side as well as on the HR structural side. And then later on we'll touch on some of these other elements that should be part of the ROI equation when looking at a CloudSuite project.
There's definitely a lot to think about. Reporting is no longer what reports do I want, but how does the role-based dashboards, for instance, eliminate my need for reports, right? Because they're pre-delivered within the application. So many just things for the first time to rethink, right? I tell people the GL is totally now dynamic, right? And when have we ever been excited about talking about a GL, right? But now we are. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit too.
So there are a couple of objectives our pre-planning exercise is going to solve here. First, we want to get organizational buy-in, and what that means is getting business owners, process owners engaged in this effort to move to CloudSuite, and really building out CloudSuite champions across the business. And then the other objective that we have is basically project scoping, right? We want to figure out what does this project look like, and that's going to help us determine how much it costs, ultimately help with selecting a partner to move forward with.
You're going to see a lot of the stuff that Richard and I talk about help you figure out, right? It's not as simple as, oh, let me call Infor and get a quote on licenses, and let me call my favorite partner and get a quote on services, because those are all going to kind of be ballparks, right? This engagement that I really love really helps you think about everything and then really understand what's going to be in and out, right? Which is going to change the scope. So if you don't do something like this, you're kind of still guessing, even though you got the numbers. They're not really finite because you didn't go through the thought process that's methodically laid out through an engagement like this to think about everything.
Yeah. So let's dig into some of these objectives. Let's talk a bit about what it means to engage our business owners, and how do we do that? Well, first and foremost, we want to educate our business owners so that way they can start to get hands-on and see what CloudSuite looks like and start to picture themselves using Infor CloudSuite for their day-to-day business processes. As an IT professional, it's your job to take technology and translate that into terms that the business can understand, and really help our business leaders understand how this available software and technology from Infor can be put to use in real-world business challenges.
It's great when we start doing the education, whether that's them getting to touch the system or see the screens for the first time, because you see what happens. They all start, right? Their wheels start turning, and they're like, oh, I can do that now. I can do that. I can do that, right? And what you're seeing is the opportunity for redesign is what's really happening, right? And so it's not just, we used to do the differences document. It's not just that anymore. Now it's really thinking about how it changes your business process, how it affects your customers and your end users. Yeah. A lot to think about.
Absolutely. So education is key, but what else? What's the other side of that is listening as well. Mm-hmm. So, as part of our business owner engagement, we do want to listen to understand how well is Lawson working for them today, and more importantly, where does Lawson fall short in helping power their business processes, and that'll help us come up with some objectives that we want to solve specifically with a CloudSuite project.
Yeah, get a pen, right? I love these two combined, educate and listen, because once you educate, grab your pen. Yeah. Because you're going to get that business feedback going, oh my gosh, what about this and what about that? And those are the things you want to capture, right? To see whether or not those should be in scope in your CloudSuite implementation.
And that's going to drive our participation from the business in this organizational effort to move from Lawson into CloudSuite. I think the most important takeaway here is that going to CloudSuite should not be an IT-driven project. Right?
Absolutely.
It should be driven by the business owners that have the most to gain from moving to this new system.
And when you think you have that right level of executive support, go a level higher, right? Because this really has the opportunity to transform a lot of aspects of your business, not just like your finance group, where traditionally it was. You're going to see transformations in supply chain, in HR for sure, with global HR. So there's really an opportunity to do a whole back office optimization, which everyone's talking about in the industry, and now we have a tool to do it.
Yeah, that sure is a lot of change that we've been talking about here. So how do we justify undergoing such a transformation? well, we need to build a business case
Yes.
that shows we are going to gain a return from the perhaps significant investment we might put into this transformation. So let's dig into some of the different ways that we can quantify a return on investment. We touched on reporting earlier. I think one of the things that organizations can do today as part of pre-planning is take a look at the amount of time that is spent on a monthly basis by analysts across the business, pulling data out of Lawson, crunching numbers, doing data analysis, and building reports, and start to identify which of those tasks might become obsolete when moving to CloudSuite, maybe because the base application functionality covers, makes self-service those data extracts that previously required an analyst to spend time pulling, or start to look at complex reporting and data analysis that will be simplified once our financial or HR structures are better aligned to represent our business, rather than that logic being held outside of the system.
For the first time, reporting is a big deal. Before it was, which reports do we migrate and which ones do we get rid of? The reporting tools in CloudSuite are significantly enhanced. Things like Burst cause you to pause and rethink things. Many of our customers have, we were talking about it earlier, Crystal reports still, back from version 6, 7, that have just been kind of following along, right? Through LBI, through IBI, and now there's Burst, right? Having somebody come in and help you make sense of all that and what should come forward and what should stay, that's a valuable offering that I think we can help with.
Yeah. Let me get into a concrete example.
Perfect.
About how our new GL structure might reduce the complexity of reporting, ultimately saving hours spent on a recurring basis. A lot of organizations that we've worked with have used smart numbering within their GL code block. For example, within accounting unit, we might see that the first digit or 2 digits might represent facility. Perhaps because that doesn't perfectly align with the company structure. Well, when design decisions like that are made, that's an agreement between all the users of the system. And we all understand that, but Lawson is unaware that that's what we're doing here, right? It's just, exactly, it's just a number to Lawson. And ultimately what that means is Lawson can't bring that knowledge to bear on reporting or analytics, and instead we have to push that business logic into each and every report that we have that accesses that data. And in fact, it means we can't rely on the delivered reports to group data by facility if that's not an entity that Lawson understands. With CloudSuite Global Ledger, we have the ability to build out a code block that's better represents how we want to record financial data, and more importantly, how we want to group and analyze financial data. So we can break out facility to a discrete element, and once we've done that, all of the built-in reporting within CloudSuite is affected by that knowledge. Once we've taught the system how we want to organize our data, the system can then report it back to us using those structures. And over on the HR side, I think we see some parallels there. We have the ability with CloudSuite HCM and Global HR to better represent the relationships between our employees, within the system. And we're going to gain some efficiencies there, particularly when it comes to time spent managing resources who maybe aren't employees. We have customers that have done numerous different sort of tricks and repurposing of different fields in order to manage a contractor base or
Right.
other human capital that we want to track that doesn't fit well within Lawson HR's model. So we should expect some time savings there and some efficiency gained. Our HR structure within CloudSuite can also be used to power compliance, to model fiscal policy. And we should expect to see some benefits to not having to dual maintain relationship data.
Yeah.
For example, AP invoice approvals might be able to mirror a structure in HR rather than having a separate
Right.
system administration over that set of data.
If HR knew all these folks were managers with a $10,000 signing authority and these were directors with 25,000, et cetera.
Yeah.
For the first time, I'm really excited about that because so many other things, right? We've wanted to point to that hierarchy to maintain it within the system of record of Lawson, and we haven't been able to because it hasn't been correct.
Yeah, exactly. So AP invoice approval, I think in particular, is an area that you'll gain a lot of benefit from in moving to CloudSuite. And beyond time spent maintaining that sort of data in outside system, there are some other cost savings that we might be able to roll into our CloudSuite ROI.
Absolutely.
A lot of our customer base have invested in accounts payable automation, perhaps by implementing different softwares outside of Lawson to help with document management or workflow. And if as an organization, if you're maintaining those systems today, and you can look to consolidate that functionality within CloudSuite, since CloudSuite FSM really comes with document imaging, document management, and AP workflow capabilities. If you can consolidate that functionality right within CloudSuite, that's potentially eliminating the dependence on another system, which can result in some direct cost savings.
Absolutely.
When it comes to open enrollment, this has been a challenge to a lot of our customers running Lawson HR to get the employee self-service system aligned towards the benefit plans that are being offered, and really make it a system that employees can use practically to run through benefits. In fact, it's been such a challenge that many of our clients have opted instead to subscribe to an outside benefits administrator.
Or outsource that function. Yep.
Right. One of the things that I know Keith is very passionate about in CloudSuite HCM is the enhanced benefit enrollment system for all employees, both for open enrollment as well as life events or new hires and what have you. By bringing that functionality back into CloudSuite, that could potentially result in some cost savings.
Cost savings. Yep.
And beyond open enrollment, I think we see that all of the self-service functionality of CloudSuite has really taken a giant leap forward.
Right. Here we're showcasing the HR function, right? But if we think about just kind of self-service in general, whether that be employee or manager self-service, vendor self-service, right? All of that has gotten a significant facelift in CloudSuite and has actually become, I would borderline say, best of breed. It's really robust. So a lot of our customers had outsourced that or developed homegrown solutions or different ways, right? Creating a funky end user experience, employee experience.
Potentially, running some processes on paper.
Yeah. Right.
So bringing all those processes into CloudSuite might result in more efficient operations because you're automating processes and tracking everything electronically, some of which might be on paper, some of which might be in outside systems today. We don't have quite the same visibility, right. So that should increase our operational efficiency. And ultimately, it's going to increase employee satisfaction.
Engagement.
Engagement.
Yep.
So, we're talking about other systems that might, power workflows or different processes. I think over the past, 15 years, we've seen enterprise IT strategy shift. For a while, it was a, best of breed was favored, and that led to the implementation of many individual point solutions for, different specific pieces of functionality. I think we see that the tide is shifting, and current trends are more towards an integrated approach to enterprise IT strategy. And if, as part of your CloudSuite project, you can identify one or more point solutions that could potentially be eliminated, that will directly affect your CloudSuite ROI, in that you'll be reducing either a subscription cost or the cost of maintaining another on-premise system, and as well as all the interfaces that tie that system back into your ERP system.
It's time to make sense out of your application portfolio, and really, personally, it's a passion of mine, the application lifecycle management and how we govern that and how we justify kind of without emotion, right? Because people are passionate about their systems. I don't want to give up my budgeting system. That's a bad example, but maybe it's time, right, to consider that. And how do you go through that, and how do you add governance to that, is something that we can talk about as well.
Yeah. We talked about automating processes and how that could add efficiency. I think that's a good example of indirect cost savings. There are quite a number of delivered workflows and delivered processes that come with CloudSuite that maybe aren't present in Lawson, or were more effort to implement in Lawson than what you see in CloudSuite. So starting to list out which of those processes might be a part of your CloudSuite project, or might be a day two or a follow-on initiative that could still be part of your ROI calculation, I think is valuable within pre-planning.
The manual processes being automated, right? I always say business is enabled by technology. That's where the magic happens. So understanding how many processes are affected by all the functionality in CloudSuite, which is significant, that's where you're going to really see the transformation happening. Simply moving to a CloudSuite implementation without thinking holistically about all your business processes isn't going to get you that type of digital transformation that you really have an opportunity to take advantage of.
Yeah. So to summarize, when doing our ROI calculation, we have some direct cost savings that we could add up for moving to CloudSuite. If you're moving from on-premise to the cloud, take a look at, project what the cost is for maintaining the on-premise infrastructure, hardware, software, system upgrades, hardware upgrades. Or if you're moving from maybe another hosting provider, you could look at the cost differences there. And then, as we mentioned, elimination of any other point solution softwares that could roll right into CloudSuite. Those should be fairly easy numbers to quantify, because those are real costs that can be eliminated as part of CloudSuite. And then there are also some more indirect cost savings, or even competitive advantages an organization might gain. That will impact ROI, although these might be a little bit harder to quantify.
Things like maybe talent science being incorporated, right? Really understanding your workforce. That's hard to quantify what effect it's going to have.
Right. But absolutely, as part of a CloudSuite HCM and talent management implementation, one of the stated objectives of such a project should be to reduce turnover overall.
It's a big cost regardless of your industry.
Great, so we've run through some different things we can look at as far as an ROI calculation to really make the business case for CloudSuite. Now let's get into some of the factors that affect project scoping.
Great.
Now, the move from Lawson to CloudSuite is certainly not the same for every organization out there. In fact, I think we'll see there's quite a spectrum here in the terms of the size, scale, and complexity of a CloudSuite implementation. For organizations that have maybe recently implemented Lawson 10, that have built out financial or HR structures that do well reflect the way the business is organized, haven't gone through a lot of organizational change since the last implementation or re-implementation. Those organizations might find that they can convert that data and those structures that work well for them today and translate that into CloudSuite structures that closely match and build upon what works well in Lawson today.
Right. Everybody's journey is going to be slightly different, right? We have some customers that are moving from 9, right? They never went to 10, and they're moving from 9 to CloudSuite. That, if you're out there, that's not unusual, and lots of questions there that we're happy to talk to you about. But everyone's going to have a unique story, if you will. And really, how do you? So when they say, well, what on average, does it cost, or how long is it going to take? Our answer is always, it depends, right? And it depends on where you are, and it also depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the things that we could dig into to really determine what that is? Well, one thing I would recommend as part of pre-planning is to start building out a list of interfaces and workflows that are in use today. Right. Because many of those will move forward with CloudSuite. Many of those might need to be re-engineered when moving to CloudSuite. So as part of the pre-planning exercise, we create a rice listing, and we want to know not just what each element is, but what business process does it power. What's the business justification for maintaining that interface or maintaining that integration? Right. And start to roadmap out what that's going to look like with CloudSuite, whether or not it'll be needed CloudSuite, and what the impact is going to be.
A lot of customers that have customizations too, right? Again, 1,200 new features in supply chain alone, just indicative of it's time to look through your list of customizations and determine if those are now incorporated into the base code of the application, and you can get rid of those.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not feasible to approach a long list of customizations and say, I need to determine a path to redevelop each and every one of these. Right. Rather, it is helpful to have that list to begin doing a fit gap analysis to see, what are the things that we previously found they need to customize, and which of those things will we continue having a need because we have a very unique process that doesn't match what's on offer from CloudSuite. Exactly. When moving from Lawson to CloudSuite, unlike previous upgrades of the Lawson system, it's not typical to bring forward every bit of data that's in Lawson and convert 100% of that data into CloudSuite. Why is that? Because when we're moving to CloudSuite, there's some inherent level of data transformation that's needed, and the complexity of that transformation really depends on how much we're reorganizing our structures, right? How much we're changing our chart of accounts or our GL hierarchies, how much we're changing our HR positions and job structure. So there is an effort cost to doing that data transformation, and therefore we don't necessarily want to convert historical data that is no longer needed for current business processes.
Yeah, these are big conversations. We'll talk a little bit at the very end around some of these bigger conversations and why this makes sense to do separate than an implementation. But anytime, any project we ever go into, when we start talking conversions, everybody has an opinion, right? Some people are like, we need all the data and we need it forever. Other people are like, forget our old data, don't care. We're moving forward. So we talked about change management, business engagement, sponsorship. All of those play into these conversations. These are large conversations, and if you have a whole team sitting there, we called it a burn rate, right? On a high burn rate, and you're having a sidebar on conversion and archive for 2 months, right? It's better to have these discussions in advance, and they're complex, right?
Yeah.
And they need to be facilitated. So an engagement like this can really help.
Yeah,
move through
you're
this.
absolutely right. You want to be able to take your time and get consensus on what your conversion scope is without the time pressure
Exactly.
of a running CloudSuite implementation project.
Right.
They need to know the answers to these questions in order to get the migration passes.
And they're important questions. They're valid questions, and every company, again, is going to be a little different depending on your industry and governmental requirements, maybe.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we talked about cataloging interfaces and workflows integrations. What about reports? That might be a little bit harder to project exactly what reports do we need to create when we move to CloudSuite, because we might not, at this stage in the game, really understand how our current list of reports is going to map forward to what comes delivered with CloudSuite reporting, and what are the different ways that CloudSuite offers to get data out of the system that might solve a lot of legacy reporting needs. But of course, there are always some kinds of reports that we can identify in advance, such as a specific regulatory report, or maybe a financial board package that we want to replicate, that we know we're going to need to build custom, and we want to identify where those needs are, where those needs are in terms of day one of go live, and what needs to be within scope for our CloudSuite implementation.
Laying that out in a strategy is what's really important.
Of course, for an organization running all three suites on Lawson, it's probably not feasible to bring all of that business,
Big bang, Richard. Big bang. Everybody does big bang.
And implement new, potential new modules at the same time, right? Realistically, everybody's going to have some level of phasing and multiple go-lives in the journey from Lawson to CloudSuite, and implementing modules such as talent management that have no peer over on the Lawson side. So it's important, long before beginning a CloudSuite implementation, it's really important to have some level of high-level phasing documented, so you know how to, so you know what's in scope for phase one, and what needs to be pushed out for later phases.
And your phasing might be totally different than this. This is just a sample, right? Some people phase by geographical locations or companies, right? So it's all different, which is why it's good to think through that in advance.
Yeah. We also want to take a look at the impacts on our human capital, right? And that goes two ways. In terms of scoping a CloudSuite project, it's important to identify what are the assets an organization can bring to bear on a project. How can we potentially reduce the reliance on consulting by taking on some tasks internally? And primarily we see that around RICE development, so interface development, workflow development, configuration console work, modifying the security model. That type of work that we can leverage internal skill sets for. So we want to understand what those skill sets are today and what the availability of those team members would be to support a CloudSuite project.
It's a question we always get asked, right? It's, well, what do I need on my project team, and how much time do I need to dedicate? And it depends, right? And I know that sounds like a cop-out answer, but it really does, right? If you have a robust IT team with a whole bunch of really skilled resources, then you probably need less of us.
Yeah.
If you don't, then you probably need more of us, right? And then things like backfills and such. Those are all things that we talk about at this phase of the pre-planning.
These are the answers that the pre-planning engagement looks to.
It gives you the
solve.
answer you seek.
And then, of course, as part of our overall scoping and cost estimate of moving to CloudSuite, we need to take a look at the license conversion from perpetual software licensing to software as a service. Really the first step there is to contact your Infor account executive, who can start getting some numbers and potentially do a value analysis.
The accountants really get excited here because your costs, a lot of them move from CapEx to OpEx, right? And they're like, and it's like, it's just a different way to think about it. So we can help figure that out.
All right, we've touched on a lot of different points here. You know, a lot of different pieces that make up a pre-planning engagement. Michael, can you talk us a bit through the RPI framework and the RPI approach?
Yeah, one of the key values of having a third party come in, right, is we're a facilitator and we're generally independent, right? Meaning we're not pro IT or pro business, right? We're pro successful outcome of the project.
Yeah.
And really what we bring is a structured framework with which to go through this, right? We set some timelines, we get the resources engaged, we raise visibility, right? We talked about engagement, we talked about engaging the business owners. All that happens through this pre-planning with a structured engagement, right? We're on site, so we're visible, we're present. People say, oh, what are all those people there? Well, that's our CloudSuite implementation pre-planning, and they're like, oh, God, I got to get ready for that, right? You're putting it in their head, and you think, oh, okay, big deal, but it really is a big deal. It really does get them to start engaging. So really, user workshops are big, right? We talked about listening. How do we listen? We educate, and then we listen through things like user workshops, and we help you through all the reporting assessments and the integration developments, and really kind of understanding what that scope is. We're helping you facilitate that and lending some best practices, right? Oftentimes, some of the most valuable things I think that we bring is what have we seen elsewhere, right? And we can share that with you and say, well, you know, this other client thought they needed that too, but here's how they solved it, and you'll go, oh, awesome, right? Instant value. So, and it really does reduce the amount of time that you're going to spend with that high burn rate that we talked about in an actual implementation. You're going to have all this plan. You're going to tighten up your financials for the board, which the board will appreciate. Be a lot more accurate. May not be 100% exact, right? Still little things that evolve, but it'll be far more accurate. And it should reduce the amount of time that you actually spend during the implementation.
That's a good point. RPI does offer a pre-planning engagement that, compared to a CloudSuite implementation, is a much more closely defined scope,
Right.
and therefore much more predictable in terms of costs
Absolutely.
and outcomes. In fact, we do have a standard set of deliverables that our offering will result in.
Which really lead to that planning, right? We talked a little bit about the value of this, and I just think this is one of the most valuable offerings that you can get, right? Is a facilitated walkthrough of what is really needed for a CloudSuite implementation, right? We had a cutesy little word on one of our slides, and we said CloudSuite is a BFD, right? It really is big. It's not a standard implementation of an upgrade like before, right? We really have a lot of things to talk about and a lot of things to engage on. It's really exciting, right? Previously, I was a financials consultant, and I'm excited about CloudSuite because GL is exciting.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Awesome. All right, well, with that, let's wrap it up and take some questions.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So, I'm sorry. If you have any questions, please type them into the GoToWebinar questions module. In the meantime, I'll take on the role here as questioner / heckler. It's a couple. So, tell me so far what you guys have seen in terms of adoption to v11. Are people migrating to version 11?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, you know, as a CloudSuite implementation consultant, I think I have an optimistic view because I get to work with a lot of progressive organizations. I get to work with a lot of organizations that are moving forward, that have some really progressive transformation, business process realignment that they want to do as part of CloudSuite.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that you know, CloudSuite HCM is a very mature
Absolutely.
and mainstream system, and I think the majority of Lawson HR legacy organizations are either already moved to global HR or in progress moving global HR now, or have it on their very near-term horizon. We also see a lot of activity on CloudSuite Financials side, and is approaching critical mass in terms of, you know, larger, more complex organizations finding success in modeling their financial and supply chain operations in what is admittedly a newer application compared to the HR side. But it's certainly it's long ago left early adopter status. We're definitely seeing a lot of movement on CloudSuite Financials.
All right, I'm going to paraphrase the question we have here, but overall, what have you seen the trend is for people moving to CloudSuite in terms of, going to the actual cloud versus doing it on-prem?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say for CloudSuite Financials, we're seeing mostly multi-tenant cloud projects at this point. And that's a direction that I personally really believe in, and,
absolutely.
And obviously Infor is really aligned in that direction. Over on the HR side, I think we see a little bit more of a mix between on-premise projects and full cloud projects.
If I can offer my perspective, I feel like 3 years ago it was kind of all on-prem, and now it's kind of all CloudSuite. So I think there's sort of been a pretty large sea change over the last couple of years. So we're seeing a lot more of that. Let me add a second question here. So talk to me about implementing software on the multi-tenant, where obviously there's a regular stream of updates that come out, not just once you're live, but throughout that implementation process.
Yeah, and for any of our clients watching now in a public sector industry, I do invite you to tune into our next upcoming webinar where we're going to spend a lot of time discussing that. But yeah, in general, moving to a multi-tenant software as a service model, you see a big change in the way that the application is updated.
Yeah.
This is a change that initially can feel a little scary, but for our clients who have already adopted that model, I feel that all of them would say they're in a better place now. Having incremental updates occur on a regular monthly schedule versus the old model, which required a lot of clients' time to run through upgrade and testing passes.
It's like moving from a rotary phone to a mobile phone, right? There's that initial, how do I do this? What does this mean? How do I figure it out? How do I incorporate it? And once you change your business and your processes to adopt that mentality, right? They don't just spring it on you, hey, tomorrow, Richard, Lawson's going to be different. They're well communicated in advance. There's tools that you can use to, when you adopt those changes and such into your environment. So
it's really different from a IT administrator, mentality. But I think you'll find that end users are a lot more comfortable with a continuous update model, because that's what they see across most consumer technology applications.
Yep, it's coming to all applications. The industry's moving that way.
So a great segue here into our next presentation is, have you had any local government clients move to the multi-tenant cloud? And the answer is yes, there are local governments moving to the multi-tenant cloud. So those are in progress.
Engaged in several of those projects currently.
Well, and a lot of those questions, Keith, I think come from the data security, right? And I always say, do you really think you can run a data center that's more secure than AWS? Because I'd like to see your data center, right? The data is secured far more than we could ever do. And there's precautions, right? If you're in healthcare, your data's got to be kept in the US, right? That can all be stipulated in your CloudSuite agreement.
So last question, if I'm planning to do a migration in 2021 or 2022, when should I be looking at doing pre-planning?
Now.
Yeah, absolutely. Pre-planning should really, happen in the first half of 2020, so that way you can have a project launch in the later half of 2020 or maybe early 2021, depending on how long a partner selection and contracting process is going to take. Because a wave one go live, without knowing what we're implementing, I would say the average is 1 year time, 12 months for a wave one go live.
Yeah.
One last question. How much system administration is required from the client for v11 multi-tenant?
Yeah, so with CloudSuite multi-tenant, it's still important that the client have an application administrator because you still own all of the data and configuration within the system, and it's a client responsibility to do first level support, triaging issues and helping end users, rely on Infor support for escalation. It's also a client, all user authorization and the security model is also a client responsibility. So that means maintaining the structure of who can see what data, who has access to what data, and then who ultimately has access to the system.
And I'd say, right, I like to say it depends, and I know that frustrates people, but it depends on how big you are, right? Are you a 200 employee company or are you a 150,000 employee company? How sophisticated are your users? Do you have power users? Do you have leads in each vertical, right? All that kind of drives the answer to that question. We get asked that question a lot.
Can I just summarize and say, if you're wondering, can you eliminate your loss in system administrator position by moving to CloudSuite, I would recommend against that. I would say the role changes in somewhat to be more of a value-add role, but it's still a critical role to have.